Okay, hi guys. Today we'll continue with our search component. We are pretty much done with everything Laravel. The only thing we have left is to just create the seeder for the products, and seeder will allow us to auto-generate some records, so we can obviously test it later on. Now, if you could just tell me whether you can hear me properly, because obviously last session I completely forgot about the mic. If you could just type in the chat whether everything sounds okay, that would be much appreciated. Okay, so what I'm going to start with, first of all, our env file. What we need to do is to update the variables for the database name, the username for the database, and a password as well. So I'm using valid with default user as root without any password, and my database is search. If I just open it in SQL Pro, you can see empty databases here. So what I'm going to start with, if we go to terminal, I need to create the product seeder. So PHP artisan make seeder, and I'm going to call it product seeder. Once this has been generated, if we go back to our editor, that's now available here. We can actually close this env file. And from within the run method, what we're going to do is simply use the factory that we've created earlier for the product class, and we're going to create say 20 records. So I'm just going to, after the class name, we're gonna say that I want 20 of them. I'm going to import this product model, and that's everything within the product seeder. Now from within the database seeder, which is the main file that's going to be executed when we run in dbseed command on the artisan, we just need to replace this users table seeder, or if you applying this to the existing project, obviously make sure that you just add another call to this product seeder. So product seeder. Okay, and that's everything in terms of the seeder. Now the next thing we are going to do, we can actually migrate everything in seed as well. So if I just go to the terminal, we're gonna say PHP artisan migrate, and we want to seed it as well. So hyphen seed, and that should migrate the table and seed 20 product records. If we just refresh the table, you'll see we have a products table with 20 products available. So later on, when we're going to start testing it, obviously the Ajax calls and so on, that these records will be available. Okay, and now let's have a look at our app.js file, because today's session will be mainly Vue and Vuex. So app.js, first of all these things, these icons, angle left, angle right, double right, and times circle, these will be removed, and we're going to move them to the pagination component, because that's going to be the only component that's going to use it. Actually, sorry, time circle will be used within a search. If I just go back, you'll see this is the time circle icon. Double left, right, double right, and angle down is the one that we're using in multiple places, so we're going to select angle, so we're going to have it registered globally here. Okay, but for the time being, what I want to do is start with the store. We need our Vuex starting point. So under the JS directory, I'm going to create a new directory called store. And within this directory, I'm going to create the JavaScript file called index.js. And now, before I do anything else, from within our app.js, I need to import that file and register this store on our Vue instance. So import, we're gonna go for store from, and we go to current directory, then store, and we have index.js file. And now on the instance of our Vue, we just need to register it. So we just pass the instance of this store to it like so. Now back to our index.js. Let's just open it full screen. What we're going to start with is, first of all, we need to import Vue. So import Vue from Vue. Then we're going to import Vuex. from Vuex. And then what we are going to do is we're going to create a module, because you're more likely to have more modules later on if you haven't already got them. Under the store, we're going to create a directory modules, sorry. And here we're going to create the file for our search, so search.js. And for the time being, that's all that's going to be in this search, because I need to finish with this store file. So we're going to import everything as search from our search module, so search. And as you can see, obviously importing, I'm pretty sure you know about this. You don't need the extension .js. These things are automatically resolved when we are importing all these modules. Okay, and now we're going to register Vuex on Vue. So use use Vuex. And now what we're going to do is export default new Vuex store. And we are going to pass just one argument to it, which is going to be modules. And for the time being, we only have one, so just search. And that's all that we need. I'm just going to fix the problems with ESLint, just as formatting. And that's everything inside of our index.js for the store. Now, the next thing obviously we need to do is to go to our search module. And here what we're going to do is start with basically creating our mutations, actions, and getters and so on. But before we do this, what I would like to start with is perhaps creating the components and putting all those bits of code that we need to extract from our view into those components. Most of it will stay where it is, and we're gonna just wrap them. Like for instance, these results will be just wrapped, and the search form on its own is going to also just be wrapped with the component. But pagination, for instance, the entire structure is going to go inside of the component. So I'm going to start with the components, and under components, I'm going to create directory for search components. So search. And here I'm going to actually start with the pagination. So I'm going to start search pagination view component. So search pagination. And if I just cut all this entire form from the view and paste it into the template section, let's just side this up a little. All these indentations. And as you can see, obviously we have already those components highlighted because we don't have them available from within this component. We'll have a look at this in just a second. So what I'm going to start with, actually let's import this component. Let's go to app.js. Let's cut all this angle left without this, all those angle components. Let's paste them into the search. So import all these. Let's just remove the indentation. Oh gosh. Okay, it's a little better. So now this is going to point angle left. We are within the component, so we just need to go up and we go into icons. So the same is going to apply for the other ones. If I just do it like this, of the components and icons, and now obviously we need to register these components. So before the props, we're gonna give it a name as well. It's going to be called search pagination, and then we're gonna have components. And what components do we have? We have angle left, double angle left, we have angle right, and double angle right. Okay, and I think that, and we also have select angle, so we need to import this one as well. Import select angle from, it goes to, I think it's under the form, isn't it? Select angle, yeah. So we're gonna go form select angle, and we need to register that one as well. So select angle, and I think that's all components that we need within this file. Yeah, looks like it. So let's go back to our app.js. Let's now import this component. So import, it's going to be select pagination from, we go into components, search, select pagination, and let's register this one. Now, as you can see, these are highlighted because we no longer have access to them. So select pagination. If we now save it, go back to our view, blade view template. If we now just include it here, but just a second. So what we need is select pagination. Sorry, not select, search pagination. Search pagination, and that's all for now. My ID automatically appends this import. So obviously at the moment we're gonna get error. It's not gonna show us this pagination, and if I open the console, you'll see that we have a problem because obviously it's not registered yet, simply because we didn't recompile the asset. So npm run watch I'm going to do so that it recompiles the assets every time I save the file. So in a few moments we should be able to see this pagination back in the browser. While this is doing its job, let's now create the next one. So the next component under the search is going to be search form. VueComponent search form. Okay, we're not going to be using templates. This is going to be functional component, and then we are going to have another one which is going to be search results. So search results. Okay, and this one will also be a functional one. So let me just check, because I think this recompiled everything. If we refresh the page, oh, we got view is not defined, index, store index, view is not defined. Okay, let's just go back one to our index.js, view use. That should be working fine. Let me just check if I haven't missed anything. View, that's all fine. Store index. Store index, pagination. Index vue-vuex. Vuex from vuex. That's all. All that should be good. So view use vuex modules. Oh no, vuex store. That's what it should be. Now that recompiled. Refresh the page. Warning unknown customer. Let's select pagination. Did you register? We did, and we did recompile. Let me just check what else might be causing this. Search pagination. Search pagination, back to select pagination. Of course, it's wrong. Search pagination. Okay, save it, and now we should finally see the pagination back. Okay, so that's this. So pagination is now extracted to a separate file. We will deal with this file a little bit later on. So for now, I'm just going to save it and close it. Now, search results. Search results, we will be returning, we will be wrapping our results within the view with this component. So I'm going to first register it. So we're going to have, actually, do you know what? Let's just get these icons together like this, and then all those search components separately. So I just move this search pagination, then we're gonna have actually the other way, search pagination is gonna be the last one. We're gonna have search form, we're going to have search results, and let's register them as well. So search form, search results, and that's Let me just check. Is that everything that we have? Times select angle search. Yes, that's all that we need. Excuse me. So we can actually close this file, this app.js for now, and we can also close this index for the store. From within the search results. What I'm going to do is, for the time being, what I'm going to do is just create the render method. Render without any arguments, because we're just going to return the scope slot. So this scoped slots default, and we're not going to be passing anything for the time being. We'll deal with this a little bit later on, but this way at least we should be able to, let me just reformat it. Come on. We should be able to wrap it. So search results, let's just do here, search results. We can now wrap our content with this component. Let's see if it's going to work, and it does seem to work. The only thing is, obviously my ID again imported this by default, so it's causing an issue here, but that works fine. So the next thing we're going to do is do the same with the search form, because we're also going to be using the render function from within this component. So search results we can close for now, and search form is going to be the same. So let's just add this render function, which returns this scoped slots default, and that's it for now. Let's just reformat, save, and close. And for the time being, it's just search form. Now let's indent all this. And if we check if everything works, again, same thing. This is pretty annoying, but I can't really be bothered to find out what's causing this. Okay, so our components, the shells of our components are now ready. So the next thing we're going to do is create the store. Finally work with our search module. So if we go to the modules, search.js. Now for our Ajax calls, what I was thinking of, we could globally register Ajax, because that's what we're going to be using for making calls. Axios package. But what I'm going to do is actually create the module which will have which will return basically the instance of the Axios configured in any way we want. So under the JS directory, I'm going to create a new directory called core, for just core files. And here I'm going to create the file called API caller. If at any time ever in the future you'll need to replace it with any other package, then all you're gonna have to do is just go to this particular file and obviously replace the implementation. You won't have to touch any other file. Okay, so API caller. And here what we're going to start is we're going to import Axios from Axios. And now we're gonna create a variable, so let, and we're gonna call it headers, which is going to contain all of the headers that we want to send with each request. We're going to start with capital X requested with, and we're gonna say that we want this to be XML HTTP request. Then we're going to have accept, which is going to be application/JSON, because we're going to be sending and receiving JSON. For the content type -type, we also going to say that we want application JSON. So now we're going to create another variable, let token, to store a CSRF token. Document head, we want to get the query selector, and we're looking for the meta file, meta tag with the name CSRF token. And I'm going to show you where it is in a moment. It's CSRF, not SC. CSRF token. There we go. Close the square bracket. And now this, if we open our app blades, I've already added this tag meta name CSRF token, and you can obviously use the helper to generate that token. This is obviously for the form requests to make sure we don't have anyone messing with our requests. And then we're going to check if token is present. If it's not null or undefined, then headers we are going to add to this object, and we're going to say x CSRF hyphen token equals token, and we want to get content of it. Headers, yeah, without the full stop. Okay, so next we are going to create the client, so constant this time. It's going to be client equals Axios and create method, and we're going to pass headers. So we can use it just like that, because you could obviously use headers and then headers, but obviously we can just shorten this. If the index, the key is the same as the variable name, then you can just use it this way. Okay, so now export default. And we're going to do a request method we're going to provide, which will take URL, it will take method. By default, we're going to set it to get payload, which will be an empty object by default. And then we're going to have config. If we want to override any configuration of Axios, we're going to be able to pass this configuration through as well to the request. Okay, so we're going to start with data equals, and then we're going to have an object. URL will be URL argument. Then we're going to have method. We want to take method, the argument, and make sure that it's in lowercase, so to lower case. Then we're going to get params. We start as an empty object, and data also as an empty object, because now we're going to, depending on what type of method we are using, we are going to pass the payload to either params or data. So we're going to check if an array of post, put, or patch includes our data method, then data will get the payload. So data equals payload. Else it's going to be associated with the params. So data params equals payload. There we go. And now the last thing we need to do is return client. We're going to return the promise using the client request, and we are going to use spread operator here. We're going to spread data as well as config. And that's everything inside of our API client. Now we should be able to make calls whenever we import this API call a module. We should be able to obviously make the calls however we want them. Hi guys. So the next thing, we're gonna go now to our search file. Now this file is completed, we can save and close it. Let's go to our store modules and search. And the first thing we're gonna do is import this API caller. So import API caller from API caller. The next thing we're going to start with export constant namespace equals true, because we want our modules to be namespaced. Then constant, actually before we do this, we're going to have two internal methods. One which, because we're going to be storing everything within the session storage, and I've chosen the session storage because I believe that search should only be safe for as long as the session lasts. So once you've closed the browser, once you logged out of the application, obviously you don't need to keep your search field saved, then it reverses to default. Otherwise, if you want to keep it for several days, however long you might want to keep it, you can obviously use local storage, but I think session storage is just right for this particular case. Okay, so I'm going to start with mutations. So export constant mutations. And for the mutations, we will have several. One will be set records, and it will take state. Then we're going to pass group and response. But actually, do you know what? Before we do this, I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit too much. We are going to start with the actions, because the first thing we are going to do, I'm going to remove this for now. I'm going to start with export constant actions. And the first action we're going to need will be the action to initiate the search. So initiate, and it will take state and dispatch, and then getters as well. And what we will receive when we make call to this initiate method will be the name of the group. It will have URL, it will have method, and any params that we want to pass. In other words, the payload that we want to send with the request. For the time being, that's all that I'm going to keep here. What I want to do now, for the time being, I'm going to close this file. We're going to go back to our search component. So search and search form. Search form. Now, inside of the search form, I need to import a few things. First of all, I'm going to use the debounce method of the Lodash. So import debounce, but it needs to be in a curly brackets because just it's a single method that I want to extract. So debounce from Lodash. And again, Lodash is something we are using with, I'm not sure if it's, yes, it is here. So this is where we get in this debounce method. Basically, what this debounce method will allow us to do is when we are typing on the keyboard, rather than making a call to the server with each keystroke, it will wait as long as we're going to specify before it actually makes a call. So if I'm typing, and let's say we're going to set it to 500 milliseconds, so half a second, and if next stroke goes sooner than half a second, then the call is going to wait until this half a second break has been applied. Then the call is going to be made. Obviously, we're going to save on calls to the server and so on. Okay, so then what we're going to use import as well, and we're going to import map actions from our VueX instance, from our store. So we're going to say from VueX. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to start with defining the properties that we want our search form to accept. So props, and we are going to start with group, because this is going to be group property is going to be shared across all three, so we can identify the data later on in a store by the group name. So it's going to be of the type string, and it's going to be required, so required true. And while we're at it, let's just open this index. I'm going to close the file browser. So we're going to start with this. So for the group, we are going to call, what did I call it here? I called it product search. Okay, so group is going to be product hyphen search. Okay, so the next one will be the URL that we want to send the request to. So URL is going to be type string as well, and also required, so required true. Then we are going to take the method that we want to use to make a request, type string again, and default, we're gonna default it to get. So we won't have to provide it unless we want to overwrite it. And then any params that we want to send. So params, and it's going to be type object, and it's going to be required. So required true. After the params, what I'm going to do is create the internal data. So data method, which returns an object, and data will have fields. And here again, we are going to use spread operator to reassign whatever has been passed through as params parameter. So params, This way we are not using the copy. We are not, sorry, it's going to be this, of course, this params. We are not going to be overwriting the params whenever we apply the change to the fields. It's going to, it's creating a new copy basically of these params using this spread operator against the fields. And then the other thing we're going to have is processing flag. By default set to false. Whenever we're going to make the Ajax call, we're going to set it to processing true, and once we get the response, we're going to change it back to false. This way, obviously, we can provide some feedback, like perhaps the spinner, disable the form while it's making a call, or whatever else you might think of. Okay, so that's our data. Then the next thing we're going to have is the created callback. So created. And here, what I'm going to do is use, what am I going to do? I'm going to, first of all, actually, before I use this method, because I'm going to use this initiate method. If I just open this search in the next window here, I'm going to call this initiate on when the component is first created. But before we can access it, obviously, we need to make sure that it's available within this component. And to do this, we're going to use the methods section. And here, what I'm going to do is use this map actions, and I'll say that I want the namespace search, the module from the module search, and I want the methods initiate, and there will be some others. Initiate. There we go. And there will be some others later on, but for the time being, that's all I need. Okay, so I'm going to start from created. We're going to use this initiate. And we are going to pass, we know that we need to pass group, URL, method, and params. So group is going to be this group. Method, actually URL first. URL is going to be this URL. Then we're going to have method, this method, and params is going to be this fields. That's what we're sending. And then once we receive the response, because the initiate will return the promise. So then what we're going to do is use the value that's going to be returned and set our fields to it. So fields equals value. And why are we doing this way? Initiate method, if we are going there first time, will set whatever we are passing as params within the session storage. Otherwise, if the session storage already exists, then it's going to fetch them from the session storage. And again, either way, we're going to be returning basically what has been sent either by params or previously set on the previous visit. So this is our created method. The next thing is going to be, what are we going to do? We have update, change, and clear methods. So I think the first thing we're going to do now is actually do the implementation of this initiate method, this action on our search module. So if I just quickly check that. Okay, so we're starting with, we need the states. So let's start with the states, and the states are here. Okay, so export constant state equals, and we're going to have, now our state will have 4 indexes. We're going to have params, which is going to be an object, URLs, which is going to be an object. We're going to have records returned with each call. And we're also going to have meta, which is going to contain things like total, previous, next page, and so on. You may remember from the previous episodes, if we just go back, HTTP controller, product controller, we are our repository search, this is a contract, search collection. This is exactly what we're going to be returning: records, params, and meta. And URLs will contain the URLs we are going to be calling for the given. Again, everything is going to be indexed by the group. So each of these groups is going to have those associated with the group that we given component is calling for. But all this will make a little more sense in a few moments. Okay, so initiate, what we're going to start with, we're going to start with a state. Obviously taking this state here, we have access to our constant state, which we are also exporting. We're going to use state. We go for URLs equals, and again, spread operator, state, URLs. So first we take in what's already there, and then we are going to use spread operator. We use the group name, which we are receiving from as a parameter. We need to keep it in brackets to make sure that whatever is associated with this variable is actually going to be returned as a string. And then we use the method. Sorry, wrong. We're going to pass URL and method. So this is what we're going to do. So we're going to add records to the URLs with the given group. So it's going to be group, for instance. In this case, it would be whatever we gave it, product search. With an object, it would be URL, and then we have method. So that's basically what it's going to represent once we've used this structure here. So we merge them together. Okay, so this is for the state URLs. The next thing we're going to do is create the variable let item equals, and we're going to use session storage. So let's use global window object and session storage, and we're going to get item by group name, because we're going to be storing them index with a group name. So later on, if you go to another module, you'll have a different group name, and obviously you'll be able to fetch the relevant ones back to the store. And we check if item is not undefined, then we're going to go state params. Now we are working with the params here on the state equals, and again we're going to use the structure here, state params, and we are combining this, merging this with group again, and this time we are going to use the item, but because the items in the session storage are stored as strings and we will be sending an object, what we need to do is to have a way of compacting and expanding them. So for this particular purpose, we are going to create the method expand, and we're going to pass this item to it. So we can actually expand it into an object. And we don't have this method yet, so let's quickly create it. Above the state, I'm going to have constant expand equals, and this will take payload. So an arrow function, and here we're going to check if payload is empty, then we just return an empty string. Well, empty if it's undefined or empty and so on. Otherwise, what we're going to check if payload 0 item equals curly bracket, that means that we are dealing with an object. It's like a JSON format object. And then we're going to go for payload equals, we're going to use JSON object and a parse method on it, and then pass the payload that will convert the string into an actual JavaScript object. Let's just remove this space here. And then what we're going to do is simply retain this payload. So payload, and that's this. Because if it is an object, if it starts with a curly bracket, then we're going to parse it. Otherwise, it's just a string, which is obviously going to be returned as a string. So now going back to our initiate methods, we've expanded this item and associated with the params. Let me just check what else have I got here. So now what I'm going to do is return a dispatch, and we're going to dispatch fetch action, which we don't have yet. We'll create this action in just a moment. And this fetch action will take a group as an argument, and then on the callback when the promise has been returned, what we're going to do is run the function which will return state params group or just an empty object, because this fetch method, which we'll create in just a few moments, will use the response and set from the server and set the params state with the records, basically, sorry, with the parameters for the given group. Okay, so we don't have this fetch action yet, so let's quickly create it. Fetch, and a fetch one will take commit and state. That's what we need the access to, and obviously the group, which we've just passed through using obviously this dispatch helper here. Okay, so let will be URL and method. These are the two variables that we need. We're going to start with URL and method. We are extracting them here, so state URLs for the given group. So when we obviously started here, when we first line in the initiators, you may remember we have state URLs. We are merging the existing one, if there's anything, with the group and then method URL method, as I showed earlier. So now we are destructing it basically into URL and method variable. So the next thing I need to do is return our API caller, and we are now making the request using the URL, using the method, and then we need the payload, so state params for the given group. Then what we're going to do is use the response. Let's just use it here, response. And what we're going to do is commit, excuse me, and we need the mutator for this, which will be called set records, and we pass object with group and response, which will be response data. Response data is what we need to use obviously to get whatever we are going to receive from the server as a response. And this is still highlighting. I'm not entirely sure why this is highlighting this. Invalid left hand side of assignment. No, that should be all right. Okay, let's see. Did we get any errors? Oh, we did get some errors. Okay. Oh, of course. Wrong. It should be like this. And wrapped with a bracket at the end. Okay, response, ESLint. Okay, let's just do some formatting. And I'm going to expand this a little bit by closing this file browser. Okay, so now we need to add the mutations as well. So export const mutations. And the first mutation we're going to have is going to be this set records, and it will take a state because that we need access to it, and then group and response, which is what we pass through as arguments by using this commit helper and obviously passing this object. So here what we're going to do is state records. We are going to use an object and a spread operator again. State records. We're using the existing ones if there are any, and then we override or append another object which will be indexed by the group name, and then it's going to have response meta in this case. Is that right? Sorry, wrong. We are doing records. So response, because we response, we're going to get params, meta, and records. So we start with the records, obviously, and I'm going to duplicate all this because that's for the records, and then for the meta we're going to have the same thing. So I'm just going to replace this with meta. Okay, and that's it. So this is because response is going to be obviously what we receive back from a server. We attach associate records with the records and meta with the meta, and that should now be what we need Let me just check anything else. Okay, I think that's that. So now we're going back to our initiate, because our fetch method and action and a mutation set records is completed. So going back to our initiate, what we're going to do now is return dispatch store, again another action which we'll create in just a moment. We are going to pass group and params, and then, because again that's going to return a promise, we are going to return state params group or an empty object. Okay, so again we retain the same thing as from this call. The only difference is obviously here we had already pre-existing items saved, the query parameters, and then we obviously just called fetch and return the params, and here we are going to store the ones that we're passing through as an argument as a fresh item on the session storage, and then return them as well. Okay, so our initiate action is completed, but we obviously need this store action to make sure that we store this new data. Okay, so store, which will take commits and dispatch, and now commit and dispatch, if you're not familiar with Vuex, commit gives us access to the mutations, dispatch gives us access to actions. That's why obviously using dispatch I can then call the action fetch, or I can call the action store, obviously have access to those actions using this dispatch helper. State is just giving us access to the state, and so on. Okay, so looking at the store, and the store one will take an object with group and params. And here what we're going to do is use the commit, and we're going to use mutation called store, and we pass group and params, and then we're going to return dispatch fetch action with the group as an argument. So once we've stored it in a session storage, then we are going to call the call the fetch method to fetch the records based on these default params, obviously on page load. So we now need the mutation for the store. So let's just, after set records, use this store one, and we take state only. We're going to get group and params, and here what we're going to do is use state params equals, and again we're going to use the spread operator. We use the existing one, so state params, and then we are going to add or overwrite the one by the group name, and it's going to be just params. And then window session storage set item, we set item by the group name, and then compact method, which we'll create in just a moment, params. Now in our initiate method we use the expand method to make sure that because obviously, as I mentioned earlier, session storage obviously only stores strings, and params will be an object. That's why we need to compact it, convert it into a string, in other words. Then obviously expanding, if we find that the first character in the string is a curly bracket, then obviously that means we have we are dealing with the object, convert it into a string. That's why we want to parse it back to the object so we can deal with it. And we're only going to set the item on store, but extracting the item we're only going to do on initiate. And this is because I don't want to call session storage every time. So because we could set this item and then obviously also extract it and so on, but that would be too much. That's why we have these states. Obviously you can fetch them, fetch the records, meta, URLs, and params. And params specifically in this particular case, obviously as object we're going to deal with this, but setting will also, storing will always set the item on the session storage. I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway, so that's what's going to happen. Let's create this compact function here, and I'm going to create it above this expand, so constant compact equals, and it's going to take payload as well. And here what we're going to do is simply check if type of payload equals object, then we are going to say payload will be JSON, and we are stringifying it, so converting the object to the string payload. And now we just return payload, and that's all we need here. And I think that's going to be it. Let me just check before we actually check it in a browser. Params storing in a session, and we setting these params on the state, on our state, so we'll be able to interact with them as an object without actually the need of extracting with each call later on. Okay, and while we at it, I'm just wondering whether we should finish this store for the time being. Let's actually, let's create the remove and reset as well. So we're going to have two additional actions. One will be to remove the parameters from the session storage, obviously by the given group. So let's create that, remove. And we're going to just take commit. Then we're going to use a group. And here what I'm going to do is use commit, and we're going to call the mutation called remove. And obviously we need to pass this group as well. So let's create that one. After the store, we're going to have remove, which takes state, and it takes group as well. So here what we're going to do is use delete state params and by the given group. So that goes from the state, and then window session storage remove item by the group name. Okay, so that's remove. We also want the reset action, so reset, and reset will take commit and dispatch, and we are going to provide a payload to which we want to reset the state of for the given group. So here we're going to return dispatch, and we're going to use store, and for that store we are just going to pass this payload. Then callback, we are going to return state params by payload group or an empty object. Here we need arrow. Okay, so now this payload, basically what it's going to have is going to have all of the items, something similar to this. Similar to this. It's going to have params and a group. That's why I'm using here payload.group, because passing to the store, as you may remember, we need group and params. Rather than spreading them this way, because we could do it that way, we just have them associated with a single object, and then I can just pass the object directly to it, which will equate to this. And params, I just get this group from that object. Okay, so that's resetting. We will need some getters later on, but we'll get to this when we're actually gonna need them. For the time being, I think most of it is now implemented. So let me just double check if I haven't missed anything. With payloads true, I think that's that. Mutations, all of them are here. Okay. So if we go back, now we have initiate. Let's now, I think everything is recompiled, so that's fine. Let's now open the console. Let's check application, and under the session storage, at the moment is empty. If I reload the page, let's see what we're gonna see. You see, we've got product search, but it's an empty object. And the reason why it's an empty object, we'll see here that we're gonna have some problems, because we didn't pass these properties to our search form component. So if I open our index.blade, we only provided the group name. But what we also need, I just double check to make sure that I've got everything. We also need the URL for the fetch. So URL will be, and we use the root helper in Laravel, product fetch, which we've created earlier. Then params, it's an object, so preceded with a colon. Params, we are going to use, we're going to have search for the search field, which is going to be an empty string to start with. Then we're going to have per page, which will return whatever we sent from the controller to this view in the form of the default per page variable. And let me just quickly show you where this is coming from. So product controller in index, there we go, we have default per page, which comes from a config, and config, we have system, we have default per page 10, and then per page, the array of per page numbers that we want to allow. If you will ever need to change it, all you have to do is just go to the config, change it, and this will dynamically update the forms. So we have default per page, then we have page, which by default will be 1 when the page first loads. Sorry, we need a comma here. Because it's an integer, obviously I don't have to wrap it in between the quotes. I can just return it like this. Then we also have order by default, and by default I want it to be ordered by name in the ascending order. For those who didn't watch this series, the previous sessions, if I just scroll down, you'll see that we are passing the value for the order by using the field name, colon, and then whether it's ascending or descending. So we're going to be allowing ordering by name and by price. And that's the params. Now, the other thing that we will do in just a moment, but for the time being, actually, do you know what? Let's not jump ahead of ourselves. That's what we have. That should now work better. We still have some sort of error here. Let me just check. Fetch says, what does it say? It's probably not happy because obviously we didn't pass all those arguments. So let's remove this session storage and let's reload it. Let's start fresh. And there we go. Now it's a little bit better. You can see product search group name in our session storage. We have search per page 10, which is what has been associated with the variable. Page 1, order by name ascending, which is exactly what we passed through as params. And now if we preview the console, we don't see any errors, and that's all good. Cool. So the request has been sent to the server, and let's see what we received. And we received quite a few records here. You can see we have, for the records, we have 9 records because we allow 10 per page, which we obviously can see in the params section, and then we have meta as well. So total number of records available is 20. Previous page is null, which means we don't have previous page because we're on the first page. Next page is 2, last page is 2. We only have 2 pages because there are 20 records, 10 per page. We're on the first page. Sort order by search has been sent as null, and obviously the records are displayed here. So everything seems to be working fine. Let's now continue with our component. So going back to our search form, if I just close it for the time being. Our search form. Okay. So what we would like to do is to be able to make another call when we type a new query, a new string to our input. And in order for us to be able to do this, we need to create a method on our search form, which will call update. So update, actually, should we do it on change update? Let me just check. Change. Yeah, let's start with the update. So the update will actually delegate the call. It's update, not update. Update. There we go. For this one, we are going to use this low-debounce method. And here we're going to use just a standard function so that we have access actually to to our component data using this keyword. And here what we're going to do is set first processing flag to true, because we start making a call. And then we are going to call this change method, which we'll create in just a second, which will make the call to the server. And here we need to specify how long we want to allow before we actually trigger this function, this callback function. And I said earlier, half a second, so 500 milliseconds is all we need. And let me just check. No, we don't need this. We just need the comma because we're still in the object here, in the methods object. Okay, so now the change method. And the change method doesn't take any arguments. Here we're going to use the store action. So first of all, we need to make sure that we are pulling this from our actions. So store action, we need access to it. And store action obviously refers to our search component and the store action. So we're going to start with this store, and we pass the object. The store takes group and params, so we need to give it a group, this group, and then we're going to go for params, this, rather than params, fields, because fields will be changed. Obviously, they will be updated when we start typing and so on. So fields, not the params. Params is only on the first load, so we can actually pass through, if we haven't got any records, what we would like the initial page to fetch, the initial call to the server to fetch. And here we are going to receive the promise. So we're going to go for then. We're going to take the value. Sorry, wrong, not this one. Then we're just going to have anonymous function, which will say, and the only thing that we need here, we actually don't need to set anything because that's going to be done automatically. The only thing we need to do is do this processing equals false. That's the only thing. We just need to change the flag of the processing from true, which started here, back to false. Okay, so storing, that's all good. So now from our render function, we are going to pass these parameters. So first of all, we're going to start with the params. So params, this fields. So whatever we are currently storing within the fields data property, we are passing back to our components, to the slot. And then update we need to have available. So this update, if we want to change it, we can also call it. So change, I'm not sure if we are actually using this, but let's have it available to our slot. And then we're going to have a clear method as well. When we click this button back here, we have this time circle button. When we click it, we want the keyword for the search to basically the input to be empty, and obviously the call to the server needs to be made to make sure that we're fetching fresh records without any value for this given input. So clear is going to be this clear. We don't have this method yet. Let's just quickly add the method stubs. So clear for the time being. And the last thing we're going to pass is the processing. So this processing, if we need to do anything with this, then we'll be able to. Okay, let me just check if I haven't missed anything. I think that's all good. So we have reset available on our search, because that's what the clear method will do. So let's actually use it straight away. So again, to make this reset available to us, we need to add it to this array here. So from actions of our search module, we want to also pull the reset method, the action, in other words. So clear, we're going to have fields because we may pass arguments to it, which fields we want to basically reset or clear. And we're going to start with this reset. We pass group as a payload, group, which will be this group. And then we're going to pass params. And now I'm going to explain in just a second why I'm doing this way. So this fields, so what we have with the fields, and then I'm also using the field sent through as an argument. Another dot. There we go. I'll explain in just a second. And then we receive the value, which is going to represent new value for the fields. So this fields equals value. Now, why am I doing this way? This is because originally I didn't have it that way. Originally I was actually resetting everything to the params. But the only problem is, if I do something like this, and I'm going to show you the finished product, if I was to type, say, Lee or something like that, and if I changed order by descending, if I was to click this clear, if I wasn't using what we currently have associated with the fields, and these fields will contain the order and per page, for instance, if I was to click this, that would clear this as well and clear this, which means it would reset it to the original state. But I don't want this. I want only to clear this field. So now if I click that, you can see price descending and per page remains. It's the only thing that's cleared is this input. That's why I'm actually using what's available within the fields, and the only thing I'm going to change is what I'm going to pass through as an argument. And just to show you what is going to look from within the index, let's just have a look at our index blade. We have this times circle here. Now, before we actually can do anything, we need to get access to those properties. So v slot, and I'm going to use spread operator here as well. We're going to use params. And these are referring to what we are passing through here through the slot. Params, we're using update methods. We're using change methods. All this spelling. Update, change. Then we have clear and we have processing. Excuse me. So what I'm going to do now on this particular input here, we have this times circle. Obviously, I'm just going to move it that way. So it's a little bit, well, it's not super clear, but okay, times circle. So on the wrapping span, I did it. So I'm going to do like this. V if show this particular icon only if params has anything within a search index. So params search, if there's something, show it. So that should now work. If we go back to our original project, and if I type anything, letter, nope, it doesn't work. Okay, we don't have any errors. Let me just check. Did we pass it through params search? Okay, of course not, because we're not doing anything with the input yet. So let's attach this to the input. First of all, I'm going to, on the input, what I'm going to do is do vModel. And vModel, we are going to bind it to params search. And then we're going to go for an input. What we want to do is call update method. And I'll key down, enter. We want to prevent enter. So prevent. So when you hit return, we don't want to submit the form. That's why we're using on key down. If it's an enter, prevent the event. Basically, no bubbling or nothing. So if I refresh now and hit return, nothing happens to the form because otherwise it will be submitted. So if it had the button, obviously. Let's type something. There we go. You can see there is something associated with it, with the search. As you can see, this automatically updated the search for within the session storage. If I keep on typing, you see this is being updated as well. If I hit this button, that doesn't do anything yet because, and let me just go back here, we didn't attach the event handler yet. Okay, so is there anything else that I need on this one? I think input is all good. Now times circle. No, we're going to do this actually on this wrapper again on this span. Okay, so on click, we want to call clear method. And here's is what we are passing through, what we want to clear. We want to only clear search. So we specify search, reset it to an empty string. If I go back, refresh the page, you can see I'm refreshing the page and whatever's been set on the session is now within the input. So we are obviously persisting what we've typed in with our request. If I change order by name, for instance, this doesn't change it because we didn't attach the event handler, sorry. We need to get there. Okay, so if I click on this button now, that clears the search, and obviously the input is also cleared. Cool, so the next thing, let me just check if there's anything left on this search input here. I think we've got for search relative buttons done, and we have input binding as well done. Okay, let's go for the order by. So order by, select, we're going to start with v model, and it's going to be params order by, and then we have on change, call change method. And the same thing is going to be, I'm just going to copy both of these lines for this per page. The only difference will be here, model is going to be params per page rather than order by. And we also need to make sure that we are returning the options that we are after. And we have them available to us. If I just open the product controller, we have per page variable. So what we are going to do is use option, a single one, and I'm going to use a v4, and it's going to be per page in per page, whatever we've passed through as a variable here. And let's just use it like this. For value, we're going to associate it dynamically. It's going to be this per page, and here as well for the value being displayed. But I need to use the @ symbol because obviously we are using Blade. Otherwise, it would Blade would try and recompile this as a PHP variable. So we need to precede it with this @ symbol. So now we have in per page, so that will be whatever we've specified, obviously within this config file, session system. There we go. So 10, 20, 30, 50. So these will be as value as and as a label for the given option. Let's now quickly go back to our browser, and as you can see, these are now reflecting here. And if I now change it to 20, say, have a look, per page 20, per page 50, per page 30, and so on. If we change this now, we have name descending, price descending, and if I refresh page, that all stays because it's been saved to the session storage. If I also go to edit the product, which we don't link to yet. Okay, we'll deal with this a little bit later on. So wrong one. Yeah, okay. So this part works, which is great. Our form search form is now, I think, completed. So the next thing we need to do is to work with the results. Actually, let me just double check if we've got everything in our search form. I'm just going to reformat it a little bit. Let's close this. I'm going to close all that for the time being so I can see a little bit better. Okay, let's initiate. Store reset, process change, store, which is where we are saving to the session. Fields value. Yeah, we're done with this one. Okay, so search form we can close. Now, what have we got left? Pagination and search results. Let's start with the search results. Okay, search results. We're also going to import, but this time we're going to import states and getters, and we're going to create a few getters for our store module in just a moment. So let's import them first. We want map state and we want map getters from Vuex. Now name, let's add name to it as well. It's going to be search result. Properties, we're going to need a group, which is type string, and it is required. So let's open our index.blade. Let's go to our search results, and I'm just going to copy this from the search form, just so I don't mistype anything. Okay, so group is product search, and that's it from within this blade view. We're not going to have any data. We are going to have computed properties, however. We're not going to have any methods either. So just computed. And for the computed, we're going to obtain some getters from within our search module. Let's close this. Let's close this for now. Okay, so for the computer, we're going to use map state. And we're going to use some states as well. So search namespace, and we're going to use params and records. Params, what's coming from the search form, and the records which have been returned based on that params filter. And then we're going to use map getters again for the search module. And we only need total for this particular component. And then we're going to have a few computed properties, and I'm going to precede them with a comp, C-O-M-P, because the names will, excuse me, match what we are receiving from the store. So comp params, which will return this params by this group. And if we just scroll up, just so we know what we're referring to, we are referring to the state, because params are coming from the map state. And params, we're looking for the params which are associated with this group. So params will have, again, same as before. In our case, it's going to be product search. And it's going to have all those params: search, whatever that was, order by, and so on. If there's another module using the search, it would be, for instance, article search, and would have its own params available. So that's how all this works. They all grouped under the indexed by the group name. So that's for the computed params. Then we're going to have comp total, which will return this total, and we need to pass this group to it. Again, we don't have this getter yet. We will create in just a moment. And then for the comp records, we'll return this records, which are coming from the state, by this group. And if it's not available, if it's empty, then we just return an empty array. And for the render function, we are going to pass params to our slot. So this comp params. Then we have total. We're going to use this comp total. Then records. It's going to be this comp records. And that's everything for our search results. Okay, let's create those getters, because that's what we need. Our component is completed now, so we could save and close it actually. Yeah, let's do this. And back to our search module. The file we're working on is under store module search, which we've created earlier. And we're going to start with the getters. So we need to export constant getters equals any object. Just scroll up a little bit. I'm just going to create a few new lines so you can see that a little better. And here we're going to start with total, which will take a state, and it will take the group name. And here what we're going to do is return in a bracket state meta group, or an empty object, and then we're looking for the total. And I'll explain in just a moment what it does. Otherwise, return 0. Okay, so what's happening here? What we could do is do something like this. If state meta group, then we return state meta group total. Otherwise, return 0. But as you can see, this statement is a little bit shorter. So rather than doing this way, we are wrapping this first statement within a set of brackets. So we'll evaluate either if this is undefined or doesn't exist or whatever, then it will return an empty object. And then we're going to try and get total on that object. If an empty object, obviously that's going to return undefined. And then if it does, then or will evaluate the second statement, which will return 0. So basically that's just a shortcut to make sure we don't have to do all this if statements and so on. I mean, this is conditional statement, obviously, but rather than typing if and then multiple lines, we just have a one line here. Okay, then we're going to have current page as well. And current page, oops, sorry, not that way, will take a state as well because we need access to the states of this module, and it will also take a group. And here we're going to do return, and again, state, but now rather than meta, it's going to be params. Params. We use the group, and again, if group doesn't exist, return just an empty object, and then property page, and if that doesn't exist, then give us page number 1. Then we're going to have previous page, so priv page, again state, we're going to use group, and return state meta by group. If it doesn't exist, empty object, and we're looking for priv page. Otherwise, if it's not available, null is what we're going to return. Then we have next page, state and group as an argument. Basically what this is doing is it's passing the state as we've been doing similar ways we've been doing here, state, and then second argument to this method will be the group. That's how it's basically working. So next page we return, and again state meta group on an empty object, and we're looking for the property next page on it. If it doesn't exist, return null. And the last one, I'm just going to duplicate this. It's not going to be next page, it's going to be last page. And we go for meta group, the same thing, but now rather than the next page is last page. And if it doesn't exist, then last page will be 1. And I think that's everything. Let me just double check if I haven't missed anything. Obviously page, not age. I'm pretty sure I misspelled something, but we'll find out soon enough. Okay, anything else here? Let me just check. Set remove we have. Store fetch. That's all fine. Okay, I think we're done with our search module. Let's now just go back. Let's go back to our index blades. What we're going to do now is apply all this to our search results. So first thing I'm going to do is total records we have here, label. But before we do that, we need to have access to all those properties from within the slot. So v slot, and we're going to go for total we need and records, which are being passed through to us from within this search results. We have total and records. We don't really use params, but we have them available should you need to use them. So total records. So here we're going to use again @ symbol, Monsters brackets, and we go for total. So that should return it. Let's just refresh the page, and there we go. 20 records is already coming back from us, and this is coming back from this returned meta total 20. And now it's time to loop through these records. Excuse me. Actually, here we can. Okay, let's do it on this div. We're gonna start with v4. We're gonna go for record in records, and for the key we're gonna use record ID for the unique key for the records. Okay, now given product name, it's going to be record name, and I'm also going to provide the price associated with this record. So I'm gonna use pound symbol here for this particular case, and it's going to be at mustache and record price. Let's now have a look it in the browser, and there we go, all our records which have been fetched from the server. If I change the order, that changes automatically as well. If I change to just 10 per page, you can see pagination. Obviously, pagination doesn't work yet because we haven't been working with it. Let's change name descending, price ascending, price descending. All that works. If I now want to filter, there we go. That works. We still have this second record, which we need to remove. So we can remove this last div because the template has 2 divs. You can move that one, and there we go, only one. Hit this, say something.s. There we go, s. And that filters just fine. As you can see, records, total records updates as well. And if we refresh the page, the results remain as we've set them. Okay, next thing, going back. Excuse me. Edit link. We are going to change that as well. So it's going to be dynamic. So colon before the href, and it's going to be a record. And we have edit URL available to us. The same goes for the remove one. Again, it's a dynamic one, so record, and it's going to be destroy URL. Excuse me. Okay, if I now refresh, click on edit, that takes me to the edit page, which is great. If I click remove, that record has now been removed. We only are down to 4 records for this filter. If I refresh the page, clear the input, you can see that obviously we only have 19 records now because that's been removed. And again, this is happening because we already have implementation of destroy. For the edit, we only display the page. We don't do anything. We don't provide the implementation for it. Okay, so that's this. Let's just go back. What else do we have here? Okay, so one thing I wanted to do is only display these records, because at the moment, if I just go back and type something here, we don't see any fallback. Basically, we should display some message. Obviously, there are no records available, something like this. So let's do that. So small text, we have heading, and then we are looping through the records. So what I'm going to do here is use the template tag, template, and I'm going to say v-if records length. If there are records, if there's records length is more than 0, display this iteration. Otherwise, what we're going to do, excuse me, is display the message. So div, and I'm going to say v else, and we need some styling here, and I'm going to use the same styling as we have for each of these ones. Background gray 700, hover, we're not going to have hover here. Text 700, gray 400, I think that's fine. Okay, and here we're going to say there are no records available. If we go back, refresh the page, and now we have some fallback. So if I clear it, that's fine. ULL, we have 1 record. Let's add another L. There are no records available. Total records also changes. As you can see, all works fine. Okay, so that's this part. Now, the last thing we have is the pagination. If we just close this file for now. Actually, going back, let me just go back, because what I want to do is straight away attach the properties that we're going to be using. And the property we're going to be using is the same one of them that we used for all of them, because we need to identify the group for the given component. So group is going to be product search. And we're also going to have another property which will allow us to define whether, if there are enough records, only enough records for one page, should we display this pagination? Because sometimes you might want to hide it. Obviously, if there's only 10 records and you display 10 per page, then pagination is not needed, because there's not going to be previous or next page. So we're going to specify, but this may be optional. Sometimes you might want to display the pagination all the time. So I'm going to make it display all the time using this parameter. It's going to be always show, and I'll set it to true. By default, we're going to set it to false. So by default, it's not going to be visible unless there are more records than fit on one page. I can now close this file. And search results is done as well, so we're good. Search module VueJs is done as well. So now the last thing is the pagination. Okay, there's going to be quite a bit of work here, so just bear with me. Okay, search pagination. Search pagination. Okay, So the first thing we need to do is to import states, getters, and actions from our search store. Import, and we're gonna go for map state, map getters, and map actions from Vuex. And we have a name, which is good. Props. Let's go for the props because our components are now registered, so that's all good. So we're gonna go for group name, which is going to be type string, and it's required set to true. Then we have always show, and it's going to be type boolean. And by default, we're going to set it to false. But obviously, in our view, we've set it to true because we want this to display all the time, regardless of whether they are only enough records for one page or not. So these are props. Now it's time for the data. Okay, data. Under the data, we're going to have just 3 properties. It's going to be default class. It's going to be px. These are just CSS classes, by the way, for our buttons. px4, which is basically, I'm using Tailwind, obviously, as I explained in the previous sessions. px4, which means padding on the axis, x-axis is going to be 4. On the y, py, it's going to be 2. Then we have inline flex, and we're going to have border solid. These are common default CSS classes. And now if you want to find out about this, more about this, then go to tailwind.com. And if you want to say padding, search for padding, you'll see what all this means. There we go. You have py2 means padding top and bottom 0.5 rem. Px we've used 4, I believe. It's padding right and left 1 rem and so on. So you can obviously find out exactly what these classes do. Okay, so going back, then we're going to have active class, which will be cursor pointer. We're going to have border gray 400. We're going to have on hover, we want background gray 400, and text we set to gray 700. So that's the active class. Excuse me. And then we have inactive class, which will be cursor not allowed. We're going to have opacity of only 50%, so it's opacity 5. We're going to have border gray 300, and then text gray 300 as well. So these are our data properties, and let's just reformat it. There we go. After this, we're going to have computer properties. And for computer properties, first of all, we're going to use map state for the search module, and from there we want to get params. So we have params available. Then we're going to have map getters, again for the search module. We want to pull current page and page. We want to pull, oops, actually these have to be wrapped with quotes. Previous page, so prev page, next page, and last page. So that's all we need from the getters. Then we're going to have current computer property, which will return this current page, and we pass this group to it. And now what this does, let's just quickly have a look. Going back to our store module and search, you may remember current page getter receives a state, but also the group parameter. That's what we are passing, and that will return the page, the current page for the given group. Okay, so that's current. Then we're going to have last, which returns this last page, this group again. Then we're going to have next, which will return this next page, this group. Next we have previous, pref, return this pref page, this group. Then we're going to have computed property called has pages, just to find out if there are any pages, which will return this last is more than 1. If it's 1, that means there's only a single page. Has pages. Let's do that. Then we're going to have pages, and pages will return an array of page containing the number of pages, number for each page. So if there are 10 pages, going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we can use it with the drop down, with the select. So const length, we are using this last, because that tells us what's the last page, or the last pages. And then return, we use array object. From, we get length. And we are going to loop using the low dash, which is registered under the underscore. I believe, did I register? I don't think that is low dash, is it? I equals 1 plus I. That's what we need. I just variable I. Do we have it anywhere? Can't remember exactly. That's not low dash. That's just placeholder, I believe, for the argument, which we don't need. So we just use the underscore here. Sorry, it's not 1 plus. Yes, it's 1 plus I. So that's what we need. So you're basically adding with each iteration based on the length. Okay, so that's pages. That will generate this array, then show whether we should show the pagination. First of all, we're going to check if this always show, then we return true. Otherwise, we return this has pages. And yeah, and I think that's it in terms of the computed properties. Then we're going to have some methods. So we're going to start with the mapping our actions. So map actions, search module, and what we want to pull is the store action, because when we change the page, we need to make another call to the server, obviously, and save the params again with the new selection. So we're gonna start with button active class. If is true, which will take the Boolean value, we return space concatenated with is true. If it's evaluating to true, then this active class. Otherwise, we're going to use this inactive class. Again, we've created this earlier. So active class if the button is active, otherwise use the inactive classes. Then we're going to have button class, and we use the action as an argument. So let CSS, we're going to start with the variable, then this default class. So default styling, and now depending on what action it is, we're going to apply the relevant ones. So switch, we're going to go for the action. Case, if it's first, or case previous. Then CSS concatenated with this button active class, this pref. And this pref will tell us if we have previous page, and previous page will either give us a number or will give us null. Now passing null will evaluate to false, which in return will return inactive, otherwise it will return the active class. Okay, let's just scroll up a little bit. So that's going to be break here, and then we're going to have case next or case last. It's going to be CSS concatenate plus equals this button class, active class, and now this next. The same situation as with previous. This next calls the next page. If next page is available, it will evaluate to true, which will give us active class, otherwise null evaluates to false, which will give us inactive class. And break for that one. Lastly, we need to return the CSS. And again, let's reformat it. Okay, let's create all these methods, and then we're going to apply it to our template. Then we're going to have a method which will be called when we click the button or select the page from the select input. So go to, and we use the page by default null. And here we check if isn't page, so if it's null or undefined, then or page equals same as the current page, then we just return, terminate the statement, returning nothing, a void, because we don't need to do anything, we don't need to make a call. Otherwise, this store, we're going to call the store action, which will then obviously fetch new data, store the data in a session storage, and fetch the data from the server. So store, excuse me, we need to pass some parameters, group, which is this group, and then params, we are going to use let's use object assign this time. We're going to use an empty object to start with, then this params by this group, and attach the page. Again, this page will evaluate to page, because the name of the variable is the same as the index it's supposed to represent. So that's for the go-to method. Next one is going to be go to first. So go to first is going to be this go to and page number 1. Then we're going to have go to pref to go to the previous page. It's going to be this go to, and the previous page is going to be this pref computed property. Again, scrolling up. This one is going to give us the previous page. Then we're going to go to next page. So go to next is go to this next. Then we have go to last. This go to this last. Then we're going to have change, which is going to be applied to our select event it's going to take, and this go to, and we're going to take event target and the value selected from that select. And that's our component nearly finished, because now we need to apply all these methods to our template. Now let's just reload all this. I want to see if we don't have any errors in the console. No, so far it's good. Okay, so let's start with the form. We only want to show it if the show, where's the show? The show was computer property returns true. So either we've set always show to true, as I did in our index, I'll set it to true, or if there is more than one page, if it has pages. So we're gonna say v if show. So only show this if it should be shown. Then we're gonna go for this first button. And with this first button, I am going to remove a few classes here because they will be attached dynamically depending on whether the first page is available, if the previous page is available or not. So we keep row span 1, we keep flex, we keep item center, justify center, border. Actually, you know, let's just close this. Border gray. We can remove. We keep border gray not. Rounded L small we keep, and we remove cursor pointer. And instead we are going to attach dynamic class using button class first. Because we're looking, we're passing, going back to our button. You remember action first and previous will have button active based on whether there is the previous item or not. And for the next and last, based on whether there's the next item or not. So going back, we also want to make sure that we attach, I'm going to attach this event handler here. So on click, what I want to do is go to first page. And I think everything else is just fine. We can remove this closing tag here because we're inside of the component, which will Webpack will take care of this later on, so we can have it as a self-closing tag. Same for this one and for all the other ones. So let's just change the select angle. I think we can get away with this as well. Actually, sorry, wrong. We're gonna keep it because we're gonna attach something to it in just a moment. And the same for this double angle right. Okay. Right, so the previous one is done. The first button is done. Then we have the previous button. So again, we're going to remove a few items from here. So what do we keep? We keep row 1 flex, item center, justify center, border top, border bottom, but we remove color of the border and a cursor. And dynamically we attach class, button class, we go for previous, so pref, and then we attach click handler to it, go to pref. Now our select, with our select, let me just check if I need to remove anything here from the classes. Oops, there's quite a few. Focus, not, I think the classes will stay the same. So ID per page, select class, let's do dynamic class. We're going to change just the opacity of it to 50% if it doesn't have pages. So opacity 5 when has pages, doesn't have pages, exclamation mark. And then we also make sure that this input is disabled. So when there are no pages. So disabled dynamically again with a colon at the beginning, depending on whether we have pages. So if it doesn't have pages, also make this input disabled. And then on change, we're going to call change method. And now for the option, let's just remove this. We are going to, let's just put on new lines. We're going to go for V4. Page in pages. Pages, again, we are referring to this computer property, which will create the array of numbers based on the length or on the number of pages that we have. Page in pages, then we're gonna go for key, which will be the page. We will have value, which is also a page. And lastly, we're going to have selected, selected only when current page equals page. And then for the label, we are going to have page as well. And then select angle, we also need 50% opacity if there are no pages. So it's not just the input, we also use class opacity. You know, let's just copy this. There we go. Because this select angle, that's just an icon, the vector icon. Obviously, we don't use the standard system select. I mean, we use a standard select, but we stripped it of any appearance, default appearance, using this appearance none, and we display this vector on top of the input to indicate that obviously this is a select. Okay, so next we are going for this next button, and we need to remove some classes as well. Again, cursor and border color. I think everything else stays. Now, dynamic class, which will be a button class for the next button, and event handler, click, go to next. And the last thing we have here is this last button. Again, cursor pointer we will remove. We will remove color of the border, and I think everything else stays. Let me just check. Define border and small. Yeah, that all stays. So class, button class, and it's gonna be last. And handler, event handler, go to last. And if I'm not mistaken, that's everything. Let's test it. Obviously, because I've used npm run watch, that has recompiled with each save. So now if we have a look at this, we are on the first page. If I select 2, that takes me to the second page. If I go back 1, that works next, first and last. Pagination seems to be working. If I refresh page, I'm still on the second page. If I check application, you can see we are on the page 2 here. If I change the order, price ascending, If I go to the previous page, that seems to work fine. Let's go name descending. That changes. We're still on the page 2. Name ascending. If I go to edit the page and come back, we're exactly on the same page as before we clicked on the edit button. So I think we've covered everything in this course. Let's just check this as well. Because we're on the first page. Per page, we're on a page 2. We need to go here. Excuse me. Because now when we change per page and there's no page 2, then we obviously have an issue. Okay, so when we change per page and there's... Okay, so that's probably something that we should look into. I didn't see that before, so I didn't code it beforehand. Okay, for the time being, if I just check this, let me just check. We could probably do this with, that should probably be done from within the store. Let me just have a look quickly. This is per page, isn't it? Per page change method. So if we go to the search form, change store params fields. So what I could do here is params fields. We can probably override this if the per page is more than okay, this is gonna take a little while. I might just do, I'm going to add some coding to this just to tackle this issue with this per page. When we're on a, let's say 10 pages, we're on a second page, but if I select 20, it doesn't display anything because we should be on the first page. I'll code something because I haven't prepared this. I didn't see this error before. Obviously that needs to be sorted to make sure that it works correctly. But for today, let me just quickly check if I haven't missed anything. I think we've done everything that there was to be done. Yeah, it looks like. So I'll work something out and I'll make sure that this fix is added to the repository for the completed exercise files. Excuse me. But for tonight, that's going to be it. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for joining me today. And obviously, if you have any questions or any suggestions, perhaps, any improvements or anything like this, please feel free to use the comment section on this video. That's it for now. See you next time.